we went on this particular dive, 3 of us, using rebreathers, went down a crevice into the iceberg, and we met the seafloor, and we wanted to swim into the tunnels that we had found and document some of the life that we'd found inside. At the beginning of the dive, I had a tiny, tiny leak in my glove, so I was getting some cold water that was penetrating through to my hand, and I thought, I can put up with this, I can put up with this. But as we traveled further and further into the iceberg, I realized that the current was picking up in a way that I had not yet experienced on the project, and it was getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And so before I felt like we'd even finished the job that we'd come to do, I called the dive. So we turned around, and as we turned around, the current accelerated, and it was exponential, and before you know it, we were trying to pull ourselves along the bottom, and we're barely able to make any headway. And I started to think there was a possibility that we weren't going to get out. So we're pulling ourselves along and pulling ourselves along with every ounce of energy that we had. When we finally got to the edge of the crevice where I could see some open water over our heads, we couldn't get up. The fresh water that was melting was just pouring down in a tremendous down current and pinning us downwards. And I thought, how are we going to get up? An ice wall. But I had observed these ice fish on previous dives, these little fish about the size of my thumb that were living in this environment in little burrows inside the ice wall. And when I would touch the wall, my hand would just slip along. My hand that was now half frozen because it had been flooded for 2 hours. But I realized that the only way we were going to get out was to jam our fingers into these little holes that the ice fish were occupying, evict every last one of them, and send them zipping into the cave, and use those like climbing aids to pull our way up and out of the current. By the time we finally finished our decompression and got back onto the boat, we'd been underwater for 3 hours, which is a long time in that temperature of water. My hand was basically lifeless and gray. I had no feeling left in it. And as I reached up to the boarding ladder, it didn't even work anymore. And I pulled myself up, and the first thing I said to the scientists was, "The cave tried to keep us today." A mere 2 hours later, we were eating dinner, and we had our gear set out because we felt like we wanted to go back and get one last filming dive. So we had a watch on the deck that was looking out to see when the current would finally slacken and give us just a few, short moments to get in and get what we needed for the film. But instead, what we heard were these cries, these shrill screams from the top deck, and we dropped our dinner, went running topside to see the entire iceberg that we had just been inside crack and calve and dissolve into a pile of slush just floating on the open ocean. And we looked at it and we realized that Mother Nature was telling us it was time to go home.